Hi, and welcome to the Human Side of Business podcast. I'm Ange MacCabe, CEO and co-founder of Intuitive Performance. I'm a performance coach, HR professional, whole person leadership facilitator, and your host. The Human Side of Business podcast is fueled by the genuine curiosity to understand how personal characteristics and skills can be leveraged to drive individual and team performance, tangible outcomes, and ultimately organizational success within business. Each podcast is devoted to sharing knowledge, expanding our learning edges, and exploring the trends in corporate culture towards growing the emotional intelligence of organizations. I'm so glad you're here. Hi, and welcome to the Human Side of Business podcast. I'm Ange MacCabe, CEO and co-founder of Intuitive Performance. I am a performance coach, HR professional, facilitator, and your host. The Human Side of Business podcast is fueled by the genuine curiosity to understand how personal characteristics and skills can be leveraged to drive individual and team performance, tangible outcomes, and ultimately organizational success within business. Each podcast is devoted to sharing knowledge, expanding our learning edges, and exploring the trends in corporate culture towards growing the emotional intelligence of organizations. I'm so glad you're here. I am your host, Ange MacCabe. Today, we're diving into a conversation about boundaries, leadership, and what it really means to thrive as a whole person in the workplace. And we are thrilled to welcome our guest, Dr. Kathy Toogood. Dr. Kathy Toogood is a seasoned speaker, facilitator, and leadership expert. She began her career as a high school teacher in Nova Scotia before transitioning to leadership roles in Alberta, where she worked as a teacher, consultant, and principal with Edmonton Public Schools. Later, Kathy served as a systems leader with the government, supporting superintendents and leaders in creating cultures of continuous improvement. She also taught leadership development at the university level, drawing from her doctoral research on female principals. So excited to get into this, and her work across education, government, and non-for-profit sectors. She wrote her first book in Women Thriving in Leadership, Practices for Cultivating Wholeness and Community, which explores practices for personal and organizational thriving. It was published in May of 2024. Now, based in Windsor, Nova Scotia, Kathy continues to share her insights and passion for leadership, connecting with leaders across Alberta and the Maritimes. She combines teaching, writing, and connecting with others in her work and enjoys a great day filled with reading, movement, and cat cuddles. Welcome, Kathy. So glad you're here.
Delighted to be here with you, Ange.
So let's start at the beginning. Women Thriving in Leadership offers a powerful, holistic approach to leadership when it comes to reading, in my perspective. Wanting to know what inspired you to write this book and what gap were you really hoping to fill with it?
Oh, what a great question, Ange. Thank you. Well, the book was really born out of my doctoral research. And at the beginning of my studies, I learned about Dorothy Smith, who was a woman working in Berkeley in the 60s. And she was the only woman in her department of all male sociologists. And what she realized was that her thinking was different because she was a woman caring for children, taking care of the details of life. And I thought that is so true. And at that time, all the men had wives to do those things for them. And she was a single mother doing those things. And so this seed was planted of women's lived experiences matter. And so that drove me into my doctoral research. And I thought, I want to talk to other women. What are their lived experiences of leadership? And I was a principal at the time and working with other female principals. And my kids were junior high age. And I thought, what does it look like to be a leader and a mother? I was sort of wrestling with that. So many people say I wrote the book that I wished I'd had earlier in my career to normalize the experiences. And then after I'd done my research with 6 female principals and heard about their experiences and been so inspired to find kind of my own authentic leadership path. As a few people read my dissertation, they said, "You've got to publish this." And I thought, but how, when? And at that stage, I was divorced. I was leading a school by myself, a house by myself, and just couldn't find the emotional or intellectual energy to get down to writing the book. And so it was when I moved to Nova Scotia in 2021, in the middle of the pandemic, that I really found the space and time to say, what's the message I want to share that began in that doctoral research and finding women led with care and also cared for themselves. But I also, drew from my other experiences and what helped me find courage and purpose and groundedness as a leader, and what was I continuing to see in the women around me. So it was really a 10 or 12 year journey of paying attention and journaling and noticing. And then until I finally got to the place of saying, here are the ideas. So,
Just phenomenal. And so grateful that you have taken the time and efforts to share this with the world, because it's so important. One thing that you pointed to earlier, and I'm just going to go down a quick rabbit hole that really resonated with me in reading your book. And it's just this small portion of, women, and I'm going to use my own words here, women consistently use what I would call guilt cards. I need to be able to clean the house. I need to be able to be a perfect mom. I need to be able to, or a present mom all the time, work-wise, et cetera, et cetera. And, it's funny because as of recent, I've been looking at things as to what can I get off of my plate so that I can focus on my passion project, continuing to build leaders and intuitive performance alongside of working with my son who has multiple disabilities. And so your point about hiring a cleaner, I think you had mentioned, it really spoke to my heart, because I was like, why do I feel guilty about this? I shouldn't have to feel guilty about this at all. And so what I am getting at with my long story, Kathy, is the appreciation of the gentleness that you're putting out there so that women do not constantly feel like we have to do everything at once and do it so well.
Oh, thank you for that, Ange. It's so true. And the question I asked myself, what is it that only I can do? And then to really focus my energy on those things. So my mother had a cleaning lady, so that was an easy one for me to get off. Not my particular thing that I love. And it's a question I need to keep asking. What is it that only I can do? What is it that I really want to do? And there's lots of narratives in the world telling you, oh, it's got to be homemade cookies you take to your kids' school, or all of these expectations, spoken and unspoken.
Yes.
We have been exposed to. And it's, so when I feel that I should be doing whatever that is, to really question that. Is that something that needs to be done by you right now? Because I might have never done my doctorate. I might have never written a book if I focused on all the things I thought I should do from other people. So it's getting in touch with our gifts and strengths and our passion projects. I love that. What you really want to do. That's what the world needs, Ange. Nobody else can do those things. So so as we live in community and benefit from the gifts of others, we can do our unique gifts. Influence the world.
That's palpable. Absolutely. And I see that there's connections from this directly into the workplace, especially with fast-paced, innovative environments. So let's dive into chapter 13.
Okay.
Saying yes, saying no. And so my understanding is that this chapter really resonates with many leaders. And why do you think learning to set boundaries, because that's really what it's about, is especially crucial for women in leadership roles?
Oh, what a great question. When I read some of the other leadership books that were recommended to me, and there are many good ones, but you would hear things like, be the first one there, be the last one to leave. And as a woman, I would think, I can't do that. I have to take my kids to school. I have to pick them up, or whatever our negotiated pattern was, if you have a partner or not. So I knew that I couldn't fit into that boundary. So what was it I was going to, what was it that I was going to give up, or how could I do that? And so For me, my husband left early, and so I was often later getting to work at 8:15 or 8:30 just before school. And but I often stayed later, and that was a rhythm that worked for me. But it is crazy making to say yes to everything, and there's that pressure, especially if we're ambitious, especially if we know we've got gifts to give and we have more to offer. There's this sense, well, I have to keep saying yes. I have to be better than everyone else. I have to do more than everyone else. And why does it men feel they can go play hockey or have a golf game during the workday? I'm like, when did I ever feel that I could do something like fun during that time frame? So finding our own yeses and nos and what works for us is so critical, because otherwise we will burn out, or we'll say, I can't do it all. And we step back from the things that we really want to do and are great at. So finding those, and it's not this is it and it's definitive. It's trying, it's paying attention, it's noticing, it's adjusting, right? It happens gradually over time as we see that. And what I often say to people is different times when I've been testing boundaries, I say no to something. I'm not going to say, go to that meeting and the world doesn't fall apart. I thought that yet, right? And I was like, why didn't I say no a long time ago, right? It's this perceived sense of, if I say no, what are all the bad things that are going to happen? In fact, we give other people permission to say no, or maybe we find that there are things that didn't really need to be done, or there wasn't the energy or just collective interest around it. And yet we've knocked ourselves out to do these things because we couldn't say no. So finding our way to set those things is so critical.
Putting my coaching hat on, I'm hearing so many golden nugget questions here. So it's, what is your passion? What do you like to do? What are you good at? And what are your boundaries? But said such in a beautiful manner of, if you're saying yes to everything, you're saying no to things that really matter to you is kind of the words that are percolating in my mind. And it's really wrapping around, who are you pleasing? So, and with that, yourself should be the top priority, because we all know we can't pour from an empty cup. It's really about ensuring that, not coming from a place of selfishness, but integration, I would say, that we are as much of a priority as we are putting other people in the workplace or at home or what have you. And the strongest message out of this chapter, and what I'm hearing you say, Kathy, I wanted to call you Dr. Kathy.
Just Kathy is great.
yes, of course. Is really about the power of discernment. And it's not something that comes to the forefront immediately, especially for women. How would you navigate if I am a woman in a fast-paced environment that's typically male-dominated, it's innovative, etc.? Like, what would your advice be to me when it comes to starting to figure out this thing called discernment?
Well, one thing that I've struggled to do, but is so important, is, can you take some time? And you just talked about in your STEM environments how it's often very fast paced, but you take 5 or 10 minutes, right? It might not even be 24 hours, but could you take 10 minutes or half an hour to let it sit? The other thing I'm learning to do is to ask questions when somebody says, "Oh, could you do this?" And I feel like I have to say an immediate yes or no. "Oh, tell me more about that. How much time do you think that would take? What's the deadline? Are there other people that are involved in this project?" Right? So really learning, those are kind of some of the questions that might help you to discern, is this my work to do? And can I do it on the parameters that you're thinking about? And so, because once I've said yes, I have this sense of calendar integrity of, I can't let anyone else down. So it's asking those questions and getting really clear on what's being asked, I think, at the beginning, and then trying to tune into your gut. If your gut is telling you like, "Oh, I can't do one more thing this week," right? Right now I'm preparing for travel in about 10 days. And so it's like, I know it's hectic, and I know I've got to do some packing and some preparation. And so when somebody asks something, even though it might be a good thing, so I might say, "Oh, do I like doing that? Would that bring me joy?" I might say yes. Do I have the energy and capacity for it right now? And that might be a no, right? If I'm dreading it or saying, "Oh, I really don't want to do that. Or maybe I've said yes to unimportant things, which makes it really difficult for me to say yes to this thing that is important that I want to do right now. So, so a little time, a few key questions for yourself that help you discern, I think are so critical in that moment. And then sometimes to say, I'm sorry, I can't do that. And we don't owe anyone else an explanation, right? It's not, oh, I have another thing booked at that moment. I can't do it because I don't want to. It could be the reason. We could say, I can't do that. That's not gonna happen this week. Or please think of me another time, or we can be gracious. That's so nice that you thought of me. I just can't do it, but please consider me the next time you're looking for something like that.
Yeah.
So we're building relationship, but we're also keeping our boundaries for what we know we can do.
What comes up for me in my HR brain, if you don't mind me going down another rabbit hole, is that sounds to me like it's framed if it's like a cross-departmental project or something that's auxiliary or extra. What if, because we know that there's a lot of organizations out there that maybe they have an opportunity to prioritize a bit better to ensure that their team members aren't burning out, but they're not there yet. They don't know what to do. What would you say about something that is considered urgent and mandatory that is added to our plates? Like, how do you still set that tone of, discernment and healthy boundaries?
So important. And when you are working for someone and it is something that you don't feel you can say no to, again, this is a muscle I think that we grow over time. And I think it could be helpful to talk about trade-offs with, a boss and say, if this is truly urgent, these are the things that are on my desk in the next couple of days that you've also asked me to do. So are you saying that this is more important? So you kind of have that, this is what we're going to lose.
Right.
I can do this if this is critical for our team right now. And of course, there are times in life and leadership when we need to shift into something else that's more critical. But we say, and this is the cost, right? I'll have to set this aside, or that will be delayed. And then I also think when we get to those places, and all of us will work long and hard. I've never seen a woman who didn't work very hard to meet deadlines and expectations. But can we debrief and can we learn from that afterwards? Hey, that was really good work we did. I was okay to spend one extra long night there, but I couldn't have done another. Is there some way we can plan for the next time, right? Is there a way that we can kind of manage that so we're not constantly in that urgent, overwork, exhausted state of mind? Because one of the titles I was thinking about was how to make leadership sustainable. The other is the other piece, but there's books already with that word. But thriving and caring for ourselves is really about making it sustainable, that we can continue to do the work over the long haul. Because of course there will be busy periods. But have you rested? Have you planned? Have you looked ahead to how we're not living in that constant state of overwhelm? Because that's where it really takes its toll on us.
Enjoying that framing, Kathy, coming at it from, a lens of application. What I'm hearing is it's really about, okay, I see you, boss. I know that there's a priority. Help me prioritize what's on my plate, because with regards to resources or time or what have you, we need to shift. I think that's amazing, and would advocate even that it needs to be normalized by leadership for their team members, because there could be the flip script where the leader's not really aware of everything because they're so fast paced or what have you. And essentially, building the culture, the same culture to have that communication. You also did a wonderful thing by framing saying no as an affirmation rather than rejection. I'd love to hear more about that. Can you speak to how saying no contributes to leadership sustainability? And you mentioned that word, sustainability, and supports long-term success.
Oh, it's really challenging to do that. I think one thing for me, as I mentioned, I've worked for people most of my career, for government, for school boards. And so at this stage, now I'm an entrepreneur, or when you're working for yourself and you have passion projects or writing a book, right? If nobody else was pushing me to do that. So saying no to those other commitments means that I can manage my time a little bit better, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so creating space to write that book, figuring out how am I going to make this happen? But if I said yes to all these volunteer things and all these things, it's like, and where is the time to work on that passion project for an hour a day for those things? And so, one of the things I learned to do was put that writing first. I would say, okay, for this week, I'm home. The first hour at my desk is writing before I open my email, before I do those other things, because that was a way of saying, because once I open the email, it's like, oh, I go down that rabbit hole and respond to that person. And there's something else that could take an hour or two of my time. So doing those most important things first is a good way to prioritize that. But I had to create that open space for something new to appear. If I'm living fully committed, there's no space for the serendipitous. There's no space for that creative energy. And one, as you were talking earlier, Ange, I mentioned Gretchen Rubin's framework about the 4 tendencies, and I love that work. It's so simple, but she talks about us as being divided by: do I respond most to outer expectations, inner expectations, both, or neither? And that was a big aha for me, because especially if we're geared to fulfilling outward expectations, it's so hard for us to say no and take time for ourselves. And so, and some people do find it easier to disappoint other people. I'm one of those ones who responds to both. And so I have a lot of expectations on my plate, myself and to others, but it was kind of saying no and leaving space was a really hard thing to do. But truly, it's been how I've accomplished the most meaningful things that were really mine to do, I think, was saying no to those things, to study, to do a graduate degree, to write a book. To create something new, like you're saying, that requires space. So it's like I'm investing in me, and I'm a visual learner, so I need visual reminders for that. When I was doing my doctorate, I had poster boards on my wall and sticky notes, and now I have whiteboards on my wall. So the visual spaces where I'm reminded of what I'm reaching for, of what's important to me, and I'm like, yeah. And there's another sticky note. Every time I wrote a chapter, I put a sticky note on the board. It's like, yeah, there's another chapter. There's another chapter. And it encouraged me to keep moving in that direction. So
that's amazing. It's self-awareness, motivation, structure, and habits all wrapped into a beautiful story. That's fantastic. Would you be able to also tell me more about, when it comes to setting a boundary and saying no, has there been examples, or maybe one of the experts from why can't I say that word? Expert. One of the stories from your novel?
Yes.
That leads to transformational change for a leader.
Oh, well, there's so many stories. And that was the amazing thing to learn from 12 different women. And what that helped me see was there are many ways to lead, right? Instead of trying to fit into one prescriptive 3 easy steps, to say there are many ways, and it comes to being attuned to yourself. I think one of the examples from my life was when I was closing a school as a leader. And that was one of those examples of creating space. I knew it was going to be an emotionally difficult year. Because there was going to be a public engagement process, and then decision making, and then were we going to be a receiving school or a school that was going to close? And so I was very intentional about how I went into that year. And I thought, what's our theme? And from a movie, I got the theme, this is going to be the best year ever. And so so that was sort of our tagline that we held. So we're attending to have a good year, even though there's this cloud hanging over us. So that transformational work of giving hope, being that person up front who can inspire and help keep people going, was part of that. And then we started that year by leaving space. There's lots of things that happen in a school or your workplace. There could be a lot of things that are typical. But I said, let's focus on what's really important, what we have energy for. We were a smaller team. And so to give permission to take things off the table was really important. important. And so did that right from the beginning. And staff said, that was the most restful startup I've ever had. And I said, if nobody wants to offer intramurals, we're not having intramurals. Because what we offer needs to be something that's important. And so that really did create space for us that year to give people permission. Like we had to pack up our rooms at the end of the year once the decision came down. Mm-hmm. And I had lots of low points there, Ange. It wasn't at all as if I kept that high tone of best year ever. I had lots of moments crying in my office, but I had a coach and we would process. And then we'd say, and together we're going to hold each other. We're going to hold each other up. But it was in the no's. It was in what we did say yes to. We had some potlucks that we said, instead of a lot of energy planning events, let's just say we're going to have a staff potluck 4 times, a quarter of the staff. So we don't have the planning energy, but we're going to be together. We're going to support each other. We're going to laugh. And then it created space for the things that had to happen once the decision was made. And so, yeah, it was kind of recognizing what's the reality of what we're dealing with. And that could be something in our lives too, as a person or as a company or a family. This is a hard year. We know we've got some extra challenging things to deal with. This is a time when we're going to give ourselves permission to say no, to do the essential, and then to say no to other things. Or when I was in graduate school, I said, we're not going to have any other regular commitments to coach or teach Sunday school or do those things. It's going to be work and family and school, right? So sometimes you do need to have a firm boundary when you know here's a period that is stressful, or I'm making a commitment to something extra. If I can have a night out and invite friends over for pizza at the last minute, great. But I'm not going to put the expectation that I'm a perfect host, that I'm coaching the kids' soccer team, that I'm running this extra thing at work if there really isn't energy for that at that moment. So the forethought is important for that transformational leadership. Messages all along the way, checking in and and then leaving a bit of space for the unexpected or what feels necessary in the moment. So
there's so much to talk about in it's what you just said, Kathy, and it's wonderful. What I'm hearing are things like, even when you know there's a challenging year ahead, month ahead, week ahead, what have you, there's always a necessity to hang on to hope, because hope is where you can still find what I would call those glimmer moments of happiness. And don't forget, you need to feel all of the emotions that are coming through and process those via your own coach, as you beautifully put and said. The other thing that was coming up for me too was, creating that safe space that in my mind, it cultivates too. What does 70% look like? We still want to gather as a faculty. What does, what energy do we have? And checking in with yourself and others. The largest thing that came out or rang out to me, Kathy, is really about community in the workplace. And these terms are often really overlooked in the business context. And I mean, I know I'm preaching to the choir and saying that there's studies that prove otherwise.
Absolutely.
So when we're speaking from your lens or your writing, what do they mean to you, and how can they manifest in thriving organization, this whole concept of cultivating wholeness and community in the workplace?
Oh, there's so many things. I'm going to start with community, as you mentioned there, Ange. So there are so many ways as a leader that you can say community matters, but I'm not necessarily going to be the one to meet everybody's need, right? But even having a 5-minute check-in at the beginning of a meeting, right? That's an important way. Instead of having a meeting and saying, we've got to get down to business, and then having everybody be distracted on their phone, kind of really doing other work secretly while you're wanting them to pay attention.
Yes.
You could have a check-in with a dyad and say, pick a person. You're each going to have 3 minutes to talk, and you get that out. It's a confidential space. You take that 6 minutes, and all of a sudden, people can release what they were bringing into the meeting. They've made a connection with somebody. They know more about their life, and they can be supportive to them in the future. And then, gee whiz, you can have a great meeting because you've kind of addressed the fact that they've got lots going on outside. You've connected them together, and you've got that. I know one workplace I was in, when things were not as hectic, we would go for coffee most mornings, a group of us. And And I would feel guilty. I honestly felt guilty. We're sitting here for half an hour. What if people are sitting here, all those government workers, they don't work very hard. But what we learned were people's strengths, their strong moments, what they offered in their previous workplaces. And then when things got tough, it was like, hey, I can talk to Morris because I know he's dealt with something like that.
Right.
I can go to Debbie because I know she's got a strength in that area. So it's that invisible investment in stopping to eat lunch together. When you're always dining al desco, you keep going, but you don't have that break. But I found in organizations where we stopped and had lunch together, feeding yourself physically, you are giving yourself a mental break, and you are building that community so that you know each other's strengths, gaps, what's going on in each other's lives. And then there can be some empathy. Hey, somebody has a sick kid, or somebody has appointments this week for their child who has some challenges. Cover that because we know that they've helped us out on this other week, and their gifts are going to shine here. So it's even having icebreakers. Some people say, "Oh, I hate icebreakers," but skillful icebreakers help us get to know each other, and they might even surface background knowledge. Right? Whenever I do that when I'm teaching a graduate course, I usually have 2 or 3 purposes in it. We're connecting, we're activating their background knowledge around this, and we're kind of getting them into this new topic area. So you can have really powerful icebreakers that kind of do all of those things for us, that when we get down to the work, it becomes much more effective and powerful. What I did in the times, I felt bad that year when I was closing a school, but when I told them, you know what, there are times when I've cried and I felt overwhelmed. And they said, Kathy, you shouldn't feel that. When you go to that next meeting, you tell us, and you don't go alone. We're going to send some people to go with you. And so I gave them permission through that difficult time. There's going to be times when some of us are up and some of us are down, and together we're going to take care of each other. So I set the tone, but I didn't have to do all of the carrying or carry that all myself. I gave them permission to have down moments, and to care for each other. And this counts. This is part of the work. And when I ran into people years later, they said, "We were so lucky to have you, Kathy, that year. You seem to know all the right things to do." And I laughed. I said, "Are you kidding me? Like, I felt like I was dying here, but I did connect with, as a human, what am I feeling and what do I need now?" And I'm guessing other people need the same things. So creating space to let people be human, which is part of your ethic. It happens in the good times, and then we're ready to do it in the hard times. Right?
Absolutely. And what you're building up to, I see the value when I think about this from a business perspective is one, there's the building of trust, which is needed, and it's a glue within organizations. It's, levels, or I guess increasing levels of curiosity around strengths and weaknesses, and how can we show up for each other. That word around community wraps itself around that for me as well. As, when it comes to the exciting times, they can be openly celebrated, and the harder times, teams have the tools, basically, sometimes organically, otherwise not. But because of all those things that they've done or practiced in previous to that moment, that equals to me grit and resilience. And so, for listeners out there, I strongly believe that there's something quite radical about advocating for leadership from a place of integrity. So words and actions matching. Absolutely. And care, which is basically what you've walked us through here, while still achieving results. Because throughout that story, albeit shutting down a school is extremely emotional, especially if you've been there for 20 plus years, and even staff having close connections, etc. It sounds to me like you set up the environment as such that it was both productive, memorable, and really safe for people to experience whatever their lived experience was.
It was, Ange, and I was so thrilled. We're here so kids can learn. And so, and our test results were still great that year. And our survey results, but we honored the humanity of what that moment was. And we did a little memory book. We had celebrations at the end, and and we felt the whole range of emotions, right? Because we can't just say, oh, we'll feel all the good things, but we'll deny the hard things. It doesn't work. I've tried to do that in my life. And I'm like, if I'm not making space for the grief right now, I won't be able to make space for the joy and the creativity.
Correct.
That comes after. We can't take those out and the other. And I felt so, we did such good work at our school, and it was interesting in a public meeting the following year that I was there. And the leader mentioned all the great work of people who receive students and who open new schools. And he did not mention or say thank you for the hard work of closing. And I felt so unseen and not valued. Ange, I was just so angry.
I see you
in that moment. And so, so anyway, I've tried to learn, not that I've perfectly seen everything because I've limitations, but it's when we're present, if we can show up rested and whole ourselves, we filled our cup, we've had enough sleep, mostly we've done some things that we love, and we can be fully present, then we can notice right now. And we might not be able to do anything, but we can say, wow, I'm so sorry to hear that you're going through a tough time, right?
Yeah.
Let me know if there's something we can do to support you, because we know you're there for us when the others, and know that there's this flow of giving and receiving, right? And you will build that trust, and people will stay with you and give you their very best. You know, they're seen and their support when it's when they're going through a tough time.
Kathy, I feel called to say, you know, on the main stage, obviously someone wasn't operating from a place of, you know, whole person performance or leadership, but know that based on the description and the short time that I've spoken to you, I don't know how else someone could have ingrained hope, productivity, you know, achieving the results that were needed in such a hard time, where I can tell that there was a lot of emotional connection to the role and also to the school itself. So kudos to you, because that would have been no hard feat to be able to keep people's concentration in times of angst like that, because it's very easy to go inward and be like, well, what about me? What about the next job? What about my feelings? But having a strong leader like you allows people to be like, okay, there's a net. There's going to be a net somewheres, i.e. that hope. So wanting to put that out there to you.
Thank you. Thank you. And there's a lot of chocolate and chips involved there too. Yeah, there we go. That can't keep alcohol in the closet. Not that I would have, but yeah, we had some vent sessions and chocolate and chips together.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes total sense. So this whole place of operating from integrity, care, and balancing productivity or results, what would you say to this question around how can leaders who've been conditioned otherwise really begin that journey? Like, where do you start?
Oh, boy. This is where the personal work of leadership is so important. And it, because that was the thing when I became a principal, I hadn't been an assistant principal first. So I had to learn all the technical aspects of the job.
Okay.
But I very quickly that it was the people stuff that really mattered. And here's the thing, inspiring leaders need to be inspired. You need to inspire yourself. And so in the book, I talk about those personal practices that we can shape our thinking. And so having some little books, some inspiring books that you could read for 5 minutes in the morning. There's so many kind of daily meditations. You know, there's the book Who Sold His Ferrari, Cheryl Strayed. And I mentioned several books, and my book could be one of those things. Most of the chapters are sort of a 5 or 10 minute in the morning that might help kind of set your tone today. How am I choosing to show up? But, and I haven't done it perfectly, but building that, how am I inspiring myself with a podcast or reading or a little message that helps me show up in the way that I want to? And then setting intentions for the day. And intentions are so powerful because even if we forget them, and I have one of these reflections, a daily reflection template that I talk about in my book that's been so powerful, but it starts with gratitude. When we focus on what's good, hey, I'm healthy today. You know, we've got rain, it's watering the earth. I have a roof over my head and good food. Sometimes we forget about those things and realize how powerful that is to be grateful. And then I'll set an intention to be, it's maybe to be present. Or at one time in my work when it was an election and there were certain things we couldn't do. And I was like, how do I stay engaged and motivated? And I thought, what am I in control of? And I thought connecting with people. So I was like, okay, I can connect with people and I can engage in learning. So I found like a free online course. Hey, I've got an hour that I've got some space. I can engage in that learning. And so,
Amazing.
I believe we have more agency than we think we do. And that's, going back to that 13, the yes and the no, we think there's a whole lot of should do's. And it's like, you know what? We have more agency than we think we do. So I can set up and say, I'm going to be present. I'm going to clear my desk. And one of the things physically for me, was instead of one office, I just had a desk. The next office I set up, I found a little round table and somebody would come in and I would go over and sit at the table with them. And the table was always clear. So there weren't notifications popping up on my computer. I was like, I'm going to choose this physical setup so I can really listen to them.
Brilliant.
In that moment. So that's an intention. And I might forget that I've set that, but then at the end of the day, I come back to fruition. What came to fruition? And I'm like, wow, I said that in the morning. I forgot it, but actually some good things happened. Right. Or I can notice if it didn't come to fruition, I can say, hey, I wanted to be more patient and I really wasn't. So I can say, how do I set myself up better, for that today? And then learning, you talked about micro learning. We talked about that. We can learn from other people, but that micro learning can also happen for ourselves. At the end of the day, was it a good day? What made it a good day? Was it that I ate breakfast? Was it that I went outside for 10 minutes at lunchtime? What made it a great day? How can I replicate or amplify that so I have better days in the midst of all the things I can't control? If I have a bad day, what made it a bad day? What is within my circle of influence that I can choose or do differently to not have that happen again, right? Maybe I was tired. It's like, you know what? I need to stop watching, reading, whatever at 10 o'clock so I can turn my light out at 11. If I binge watch or stay up later, it's not a good day. And we have the agency to make a different choice for the next day.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Again, it sounds like you are influencing us to lean further into our own self-awareness and embracing that reflection, because that can be part of our own micro-learning moments. And there's opportunities to seek mentorship. So, having that validation of our reality is really important when we're trying to grow certain skills. And then I'm also hearing, if I can, impose this thought, is unlearning traditional leadership models.
Yeah. Oh, I remember thinking, Ange, before I was in a formal leadership position, I was paying attention. I was kind of watching and I was thinking, oh, that didn't go very well, or wow, I don't think I'd do that in future. When I got into that formal leadership role, I saw a whole lot of things that were going on in the backside that I didn't realize from the front side.
Right.
It's this being aware. And in research, we call that being a participant observer, right? We're living in our workplace, but we're paying attention to what's happening. And so as you watch what might be traditional, that story I told you about not being seen, leader didn't mention the hard work. He just celebrated the good work, right? And you observe and you say, I felt so unvalued in that moment. How do I apply that in the future? How do I apply that in the future? And some of those are my own mistakes, Ange, because there have been many of those as well. There was a time I look back that I regret. There was a field trip. I knew that a parent, it was skating. A kid was skating fast, bumped into her. She fell. And somebody said, yeah, a friend took care of her, took her to the hospital. I did not follow up. And I heard from her in 2 weeks. And she said, I'm so disappointed in you, Kathy. Here I was volunteering for the school.
Yeah.
I hurt myself. She had to get surgery. Like it was bad.
Oh, wow.
All these. And I was like, oh man. And I felt overwhelmed at that time, but I went to her and I said, I am so sorry. You're right. I should have done more. And I'm so sorry. And I did some research and found a way I could help her out a bit. And I took her a little gift and I still feel guilty. I don't know whether she forgave me, but
I would hope so.
But we can learn from our mistakes,
Yes.
and we can learn from other people's mistakes as we observe. How did that go? Right? If we're in a tough time, COVID, did they show up with care, or did they show up with the typical business as usual? And how am I going to do that? Even in that school closure situation, one of the senior leaders said, yeah, you can tell them in the morning that your school is closing and then you'll teach the day. And I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa. Like, that is not happening. I'm like, when does it become public? It's like after school, Friday at 5. I said, you need to make sure it's not public till 5. I'm going to tell them at the end of the day.
Right.
And go home for the weekend and process, and then we'll deal with it. But the senior leader was like totally, oh yeah, we'll tell them their school's closing in the morning and expect them to go teach for the day. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Just so emotionally unaware. And at that time, people were less attuned to emotional intelligence, but we can pay attention and we can do differently now. And sometimes that choice is if we find ourselves consistently in an environment that doesn't let us be human, that's not attuning to those things, we may choose that that's not the environment that we want to be in, right? That's the ultimate choice. We can do everything we can to communicate, to set boundaries, to work proactively with people. And then there are times when we need to say, this is not a good fit for me. I can't be fully human and show up the way I want to. And maybe it's time for a change. So
yeah.
I've seen women go outside of the traditional systems to lead the way that they want to, much like you're doing, running your own.
You nailed it.
Yeah. Sometimes those systems are not working for us, and we create things on our own. And I, like with your work, people are soaking it up, right? People are longing for that ability to be human and fully human, and to do that for other people as well. Create mutual thriving, because I talk about the personal work for thriving, but ultimately that's about creating communities for mutual thriving. If I can be human, if I can have some boundaries and balance, that should come with wanting the same for other people that I work with, and create conditions where others can also make those choices.
Absolutely appreciating your humanness coming into the podcast. It takes a lot of strength, I think, to be vulnerable or humble around things that have not gone well, especially taking it from a lens of, hey, learn from me, or, observe and reflect within yourself. It's brilliant. It's beautiful. Oh. Definitely an art. You also introduce a really interesting word in your book. I wouldn't say introduce, but for me as, a leadership coach or a trainer, what have you, co-leadership is not a word that's seen as a model of shared power, distribution of leadership roles to encourage collaboration. It happens organically in some organizations, but we all know that we need more of that, right? So help me understand a little bit more about stepping into co-leadership, because it can feel risky. Like, what if I lose my job, or I'm not perceived as strong as I was before? And especially in those environments that have been male dominated. Like, what advice do you give or have for women who want to embrace co-leadership, but may feel hesitant or unsupported in doing so?
Wow, such an important question. And first of all, co-leadership is something, the two examples that I give in my book, that was something that grew over a long time and of naturally working together. But I so felt, Ange, that pressure as a new principal to get it all right, to know everything, to do everything, to say, yes, I can do this. And I stepped into the principalship without ever having been an assistant principal. And I was in a small school and I had no assistant principal. So I especially felt this need to get it all right, to work long hours. And I felt I didn't have a lot of confidence, I have to tell you, the first couple of years. And I felt I had to put on the shield of, I know it all and I know what to do, when I truly did not. And so it might start growing with that person that is a colleague, and you just hit it off, right? And you say, things get better. And as a leader, this is something that we cultivate amongst others. When I first went to government, my my manager said, don't stay stuck on anything for more than 5 minutes. If you don't know what you're doing, ask somebody, please. And they said that over and over again. And so they gave permission. We are not expecting you to know everything. We believe collaborative work is important. So I started doing that, and I'd say, hey, I've got this idea. What do you think? Or let's have a conversation first. So it was, when I was a principal, I happened to be in two small schools where I didn't have an assistant principal either time. I had people I depended on. I tried to cultivate that sense of team, but the actual top-down structure did not let me have an assistant principal because we had small numbers. But when I started working in government and on boards, I really started to see the power of the team and the broader perspectives. And when I saw these other people, and both of the people, the two teams of women who ended up working in co-leadership outside of systems, it began within systems where they were both assistant principals together. And they were like, wow, it's just better when we have the conversation, right? We get better results. We come up with better ideas. There's more creativity and innovation when we have these conversations and figure it out together, debrief together, get those multiple perspectives. And so that's a starting place. Or there's lots of people who might say, here's this extra job or an additional committee at work. I don't feel like I can hold all the responsibility. Can we do that as a team? So it might be a volunteer job that you say, we're going to do it together. And so between us, one of us can always show up, but you start to have the benefit of that collaboration. Because what I've seen in working on boards and then watching these two sets of co-leaders, it gets better together. And when I drew on somebody here, I'm thinking about this decision, and they would say, have you thought of that? I've noticed this culture around us. I think you might get this reaction. I think we might want to try another tactic here. And so that became so highly valuable. So it might start out to be casual or just a collaboration on the team. But these groups of women just said, I know that we have shared values and shared vision, but we have complementary gifts. And together we can do more. We're more than the sum of our parts. And so they looked for opportunities over time. It took a long time for them to get to those co-leadership places.
Yes.
But they would apply and innovate and created that work together. And they also then helped each other take care of each other. They're like, hey, you need to take a break, or yes, you can go spend time, care for your father for a couple of days because I've got this, right? It's depending on you. And so I've seen the power of that, but it's releasing this thought that I or anyone else has all the answers or can lead perfectly on my own.
Right.
So what are the ways to come as a team? Even if you're a single leader, here's this big, hairy decision we've got to make. I need your insights. I need to make the decision and I'll be responsible, but I value what you bring to the table. And then you give people in your organization time to do the same. So it's less top down, this is what we're doing, or conversation about, here's a possibility going forward. Have you talked to a few other people? Because my experience later was that it always got better through collaboration, through those extra conversations, and seeing these amazing co-leaders work together. And that's how they created sustainable work, but also really effective results.
Amazing. We're all about knowledge to action here at Intuitive Performance. So for our listeners, Kathy, many of which are emerging leaders or mid-level leaders, could you provide some practical, actionable tools or practices from your book that they can start using right away to foster personal growth and leadership effectiveness?
I would love to. So I'll just repeat again that daily reflective tool that I love. And I realized recently, Ange, I had sort of fallen off that because I do have daily reflective and reading time. I stopped using that. And I was like, no wonder I was feeling sort of like I was drifting along because I hadn't set those intentions. So 5 words, this could take you 5 or 10 minutes at the beginning of the day. Gratitude, 3 things I'm grateful for. Intention, being, how do I want to show up today? And maybe that's your challenge point. Is it present? Is it curious? Instead of being angry and judgmental, what is that intention? And an affirmation. I didn't mention that before. What is the message that you need to hear? You can tell yourself that. It might be, I'm enough. I just got a mantra band at the yoga studio. Be here now. Be here now. What is the affirmation that I can remind myself of that will help me have a better day? And then at the end of the day or the next day, that fruition, that looking back, how did it go? I set that intention and I held that affirmation. How did that bear fruit or not? And then learning. How can I show up differently tomorrow? The power of that reflective tool, Ange, and I've had a separate little book that I've done for that has been transformative in my life. And then space to collaborate. I would say, you might be working on something. Can you, either if you're leading team meetings, can you create that space to connect, or can you create that space to check and collaborate? If you're doing something on your own, say, hey, I've got this idea. And here's something I learned as a leader too. There were people, I'd go to a staff meeting and there were people that were kind of resistors. So here's a little trick I did. I started to go to them on Monday for the Thursday staff meeting. I said, hey, you always have great ideas about how things can run more smoothly. Here's an idea I'm thinking of bringing up on Thursday. What am I not seeing? Help me understand that. And then by the time we get to the meeting Thursday, they're an ally instead of a resistor, right? I invited them into the conversation beforehand and valued the critique that they brought to the situation.
Brilliant.
Just watching them sit there at the other end of the table saying, I dare you to ask us to do something new or different this time.
Yeah.
So that was creating that space for collaboration, for getting to know each other, for honoring that community. And, even at the end of a meeting, you could say, hey, we've talked about these things. I want you to look around the room. Is there somebody you could have a conversation with this week that could help move that idea forward for you? Right? Doesn't have to take a lot of time, but you're giving permission for people to build community and to work together, believing that you're going to come to better solutions and be more effective for having that community.
So we're talking about what is, this whole person leadership approach, applying intuitive words. Apologies,
Yes.
Kathy.
Yes.
But it truly is. And really digging into what I'm hearing through storytelling, the needed skill sets that often aren't talked about in the workplace, especially for women. Yeah. And then, graduating to these tools of reflection, which, by the way, I'm going to go back and write down myself because it sounds amazing. When it comes to building these habits and understanding what resonates within ourselves, what about, getting over that second guessing ourselves as we unlearn an old lesson or leadership style and then relearn to lean into this? Do you have any advice on how our listeners could navigate that?
Oh, wow. It, these conversations that we have, I look at women or leaders that I've admired, and when you talk to them, they tell their stories of failure, right? So recognizing I'm not alone. I remember asking, I felt like I had to get every decision right. And this experienced wise leader said, I made the best decision I could with the information I had. And if I got it wrong, I would make a different decision. I would go back and we would do that. And so I was like, wow, you give yourself permission to do that. Right. I think in the book, I've really tried to share as many mistakes as strengths. This is the work of a lifetime to grow into ourselves and to notice. And so cultivating that self-compassion to say, I will make mistakes. I will get this wrong, but we cultivate this learning mindset. And that builds trust with leaders too. When we think about those traditional leadership behaviors that may not be serving I've got it all right. I made the decision. It was wrong, but I'm just sticking to my guns because I don't want to be vulnerable. You find when we start to be more human, you give other people permission to be human, and it builds trust. It actually builds trust instead of reducing it. They're human too. And then they have permission. Wow, I could try. I don't need to be perfect from the get-go, because I think that keeps lots of people, especially women, from leadership. Right? If I can't do it perfectly, I don't want to step in because we much more of ourselves. I can try and I can learn and grow and I can do it better next time. And so we cultivate these learning cultures, that means all of us. It means the leader. It means the person trying a job for the first time. And you mentioned debriefing. I so admired one of my participants, and she had a very intentional mentor of a leader when she was an assistant principal, and went for breakfast every Friday. And she said, how did that thing go? So she gave her the ability to make decisions, but then they debriefed at the end of the week. What would you do differently the next time? Right.
Amazing.
So she had that beautiful supportive learning lab to really her leadership. And then guess what? She did the same for other people, right? So if you haven't experienced that, you could start to be that person or say, I want to step up. Hey, let's do this together. And we grow other people's capacity. We do better work. And that is an act of leadership in itself, is sharing the power and building our collective capacity.
So beautiful hearing, words like mentorship, coaching, being able to pass along skill sets in such a way that is, accommodating individual employee needs, as well as, that beautiful flow of coaching. Love all of this. I'd also add, hearing you speak earlier and reading some of your book already, that there's the other pieces of, practicing that discernment and being able to remind ourselves of those questions. Does this decision or, time block or whatever I'm doing align with my values? I think that there was large echoes throughout with that too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I want to just amplify your word coach, because this is the whole piece, as opposed to the you should do this. And the foundation of coaching is believing people have the insight and compassion within themselves to figure it out, right?
Yes.
Space and ask good questions. So what feels right, and giving people a chance to identify their values. I mean, I give one list. Brene Brown does great work. Everyone's saying because it matters. Have that alignment, and to ask people what feels like the right step for you, what aligns with your values, what could you do? Because when we say you should do this, if it doesn't work, then they can just blame us, right? But if we help them, what feels right for you in the circumstance, what do you feel you could do? And we empower them to think and make a good decision for themselves. That is building their leadership capacity, strengthening their value base. So and all of that becomes part of that personal work of leadership, of knowing ourselves, understanding, and then that micro learning day by day, week by week. And even I would say that too, Ange, if somebody says, I can't do that daily, at times as a principal, I had a weekly reflection, right? However you can fit it in. Practices can be daily, practices can be weekly, practice can be monthly, right? So start with what you think you can do, but do it regularly. And let that grow into a practice that changes your life.
Absolutely. Backing into that, the habit formation. I love it. Kathy, this conversation has been so enriching. Before we wrap up, what's one key message that you hope every woman in leadership takes away from your book?
We need every woman sharing their gifts for the world to thrive. Now more than ever, with what's going on, the world needs what only you can give. And you deserve to do that from a position of thriving and well-being. You don't have to sacrifice your well-being to lead and offer your gifts. So that was my goal, was to really help every woman say, I've got something that I want to share with the world, and I'm going to find a way to offer it and step up.
Absolutely. And stepping into that mindset, tell us, where can we find your book so that we can learn and grow?
Thank you. It is for sale on Indigo and Amazon. And if you've got Prime or something, then you can get it mailed. Friesen Press is my publisher, and they always have it. And I would love to come to events, and I have books that I can sell personally as well. So, so wherever they are, they can order it. And it is available as an ebook as well. To just skip that shipping through Amazon, you can get it on Kindle if that's your preferred reading format. And I hope that you're inspired by the stories, but it also helps you do your personal work of reflection and figure out what your authentic, sustainable leadership path is. So
amazing. Thank you so much for being here, Kathy. Your work is truly creating space for a new kind of leadership, one that is deeply human and sustainable. And to our listeners, if today's episode resonated with you, share it with someone in your leadership circle. Let's keep this ripple going.
Thank you. And I'm on LinkedIn and Facebook, Dr. Kathy Toogood. You can follow me for updated learning opportunities and more ideas around this work of thriving. Thank you so much, Ange. It's been so great to be in conversation.
My pleasure. Take good care.
Thanks for listening to the Human Side of Business podcast. I'm glad you could join us. If you enjoyed today's episode and want to stay updated with our latest content, make sure to visit our website. The link can be found in the episode description, where you can subscribe to the podcast, sign up for our newsletter, and learn more about our whole person leadership services. Sounds interesting? Explore the Whole Person Leadership Cohort by Intuitive Performance, a unique program that offers unparalleled support to managers on every step of their leadership journey. Our program features evidence-based assessments, workbooks, group coaching, and interactive learning experiences to help you level up your leadership skills. Reach out today to apply to one of our upcoming cohorts. Until next time, take care and stay curious. Thanks for listening to the Human Side of Business podcast. I'm glad you could join us. If you enjoyed today's episode and want to stay updated with our latest content, make sure to visit our website. The link can be found in the episode description, where you can subscribe to the podcast, sign up for our newsletter, and learn more about our whole person leadership services. Sounds interesting? Explore the Whole Person Leadership Cohort by Intuitive Performance, a unique program that offers unparalleled support to managers on every step of their leadership journey. Our program features evidence-based assessments, workbooks, group coaching, and interactive learning experiences to help you level up your leadership skills. Reach out today to apply to one of our upcoming cohorts. Until next time, take care and stay curious.